Hello, Pre-Calc 11 students. We're going to work on factor by substitution and grouping today. So once again, I'm going to use the notes that you got at the beginning of the year if you want to follow along with them, or you can just watch and try the questions in that practice package that I have provided and attached to the website and to the Teams. Okay, so remember at the very last example from the last video, if you watched it, is that when something looks a little freakish, you can substitute it. And what we usually do is we substitute it with a U and call it U substitution. But really, you could substitute it with whatever you wanted. You could draw little kitty faces if you wanted to, but we just use U just because. So if you look at example 1, we have some freakish looking things, and it looks like A minus B. And if you look at that, it looks very intimidating to factor by decomp or box method in this state. So what we do instead is we just make a statement and we say let x equal A minus B. Now I picked X this time because I don't know, I feel like using it, but I could use U. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to let U equal A minus B. Now again, you could use X, you could use anything you want to. So I'm going to replace everything that I highlighted in yellow with a U. So instead of A minus B squared, it's going to be U squared. Instead of 10 multiplied with A minus B, it's going to be positive 10 times U. And then plus 16 doesn't have anything to do with A minus B, so I'm just going to factor it that way. Now we can factor this trinomial, and this is a trinomial that is a simple trinomial because the number in the A position is A1. So we don't have to use decomp or box method, we just have to find two numbers that multiply to give us 16. And those same two numbers have to have a product, or not product, sum of 10. Okay, let's pause the video here and try to think of those numbers. And if you got 8 times 2, that is good. Sorry, my daughter's screaming in the backyard, and I'm just deciding whether I have to abandon this video and go find out what's happening, or whether I can keep going. All right, so our numbers are 8 and 2, and they're both positive 8 and 2. So they have a positive product, which means they have to have the same sign, and they have a positive sum, which means they are going to be both positive. And I can just stick those straight into my factor brackets. So the U, one of the U's from that U squared goes into the beginning of the first bracket, and the other one goes into the beginning of the second bracket. And then we're going to add our positive 8 to one bracket, and our positive 2 to the second bracket, or plus 2. It doesn't matter which bracket I put it in, as long as one goes in one and one goes in the other. Now, we're not done because we need to answer this in the format that was provided to us, which did not have any U's in it at all. So we're going to replace these U, we're going to resubstitute them with what we said they were going to be equal to. So those U's are going to be substituted again for A minus B. So I'm going to rewrite this as, instead of writing U, I'm going to write A minus B. And then it's going to be plus 8. And for that second bracket, it's also going to be A minus B instead of writing U, and it's going to be plus 2. Now, there's nothing else to simplify in there. If you look in the brackets, you have 3 different types of terms. There's no like terms to group, so you are done. And that was way more simple. That was simpler than having to use those A's and B's in the original question to try to factor that. So we're going to try the second one. I'd like you to pause it here and try it on your own. What would you substitute out? Okay, so if you notice, we have this 4 minus x in both terms. It makes it look a little bit more complicated, and it would be more complicated to factor it with those in there. So to simplify things, we're going to let we're going to let u equal 4 minus x. Okay, so instead of writing, I'm going to rewrite this out, but instead of writing 4 minus x, every place I see that highlight, I'm going to write a u instead. I think one of the reasons why they picked u instead of x is that we're so used to seeing x, and x is used quite often. We're not used to seeing u, so usually if we see it, it kind of triggers our brain to go, oh, I need to resubstitute the actual values in at the end. So here we have something a little bit more complicated because the number in the A position is not a 1. All right. We also double check to see if we can factor out anything that's common with all 3 terms, but there's not. So we have to use those lovely numbers. So pause the video here and try that out. But we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to what 15 times 8 is, which is 120. So we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 120, and the same 2 numbers have to add to positive 26. So those numbers are going to be 6 and 20. If you had a hard time finding them, remember you list out all the factor pairs for 120 and see which ones will add to 26. Okay, I'm going to use decomp method, but if you want to use box method or crisscross method or some other method, go for it. So I'm going to rewrite this out, but instead of that middle term, I'm going to decompose it to 20u and has a 0 and 6u plus 8. Okay. I'm going to change colors here. I'm just going to put that in a little bubble so it stays separate. Okay, and now because I'm going to do grouping, so that's why it's called factor by grouping sometimes, is that I'm going to group those first 2 terms and factor just those. So the biggest common factor of 15u squared and 20u is 5u. I'm left with 3u plus 4. This is positive, so I'm going to have a positive down here, and the greatest common factor of 6u plus 8 is going to be just a 2, and that leaves us with a 3u plus 8. I know I did it right because this, not what I want to do. This and this are the same, so I'm going to factor out 3u plus 4, which leaves me with 5u plus 2. And so that's not my final answer though. So we always double check our final answer to see, can we factor out any more? And we cannot, but we also double check it to see, have we replaced what we substituted in for? So we substitute u for 4 minus x. We have to put that 4 minus x back in. And because it's it has a coefficient in these binomials, we need to kind of be careful with our brackets. So I'm going to have my 3 there, and the u is now going to be 4 minus x. So do you see how I'm substituting it back in brackets? I kind of skipped that step over here because it was unnecessary, because there was no coefficient. But when there is a coefficient, you have to substitute in with brackets. It's always really good practice to do regardless. So I'm going to, that's the first bracket, so I substituted 4 minus x back in for u. In the second bracket with the coefficient 5, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, and I'm not done. So here I have a little extra work to do. I have to distribute that coefficient to both things in the bracket. And then I'm going to probably have to simplify again. Oops, I'm going to do a square bracket at the end of that. So 3 times 4 is 12. 3 times negative x is negative 3x plus 4. That's my second bracket. So I'm kind of shoving it. I need some space. I didn't give myself enough room. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. So 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times negative x is negative 5x. And then we have a plus 2. And now we have to group our like terms. So this is going to be a negative 3x, but I have 12 and a plus 4, which are like terms because they both don't have a variable. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong thing when I go to get my highlighter. So I'm going to group these like terms in their respective brackets. So 12 plus 4 is going to be a 16. And then on this one, I'm going to do negative 5x. We always like to do the term that has the variable first and then the term without a variable last, if possible. And 20 plus 2 is 22. Okay, and there is our answer. Okay. So we're going to do that again. This is factored by grouping, which is actually, if you're using decomp method, you actually have already been doing that. So it's when you look at a whole, expression like this, and there's nothing common in any of it, that you want to go, hey, well, I can't do anything with the whole thing, but maybe if I chunk it together, something will happen. And a lot of math is just kind of manipulating the numbers to see if you can work with it, see if you can do something with it. And sometimes it's trial and error. Sometimes you go down one path and you're like, nope, that's not giving me what I need in order to answer this question. And then you try something else. So when I say, and when I have said in the course that you need to make mistakes and be comfortable with making mistakes in math, I wasn't lying. You need to try things out. And if it doesn't work, that's okay, as long as you understand why it doesn't work and why you can't force it to do what you want to. Okay. So here we're going to do factor by grouping. We're going to group those first two together. The greatest common factor of 12x squared and 8x is going to be 4x. And that's going to leave us with 3x plus 2. And then we're going to use the symbol here. And there's nothing common between negative 3x and negative 2, but there is, it's just going to be 1. Because if there's no larger number, the default is going to be 1. And because the first term was a negative, we're going to do a negative 1. So we divide negative 1 in both those two terms, we are left with a positive 3x and a positive 2. And would you look at that? You have the same thing in both these mega terms. And so you can factor out the 3x plus 2 from both terms, and you're left with 4x minus 1. And then you double check, can either of these things, either of these brackets be simplified further? So for example, if that second bracket said 4x minus 2, both 4x and 2 could also be simplified, which means we missed a simplification or a factoring out earlier, but that's okay, we can also do it at that step. Right now, neither of these can be simplified. That is our answer. So look at this one. Pause the video and try this one. Okay. So I'm going to do each two. I'm going to do pairs and just see how that works for me. So in this first one, the thing that's common between both of them is there's a 2 and there's an x squared in both of them. And that leaves me with an a minus b. Okay. I'm going to do some color coding here. I'm going to do the same thing with the next two. Okay. Because there's something common with both of those. And I'm going to use the symbol for the first term to be my symbol here. So I'm going to do a negative 2. And there's also an x in both those terms. I'm going to do a negative 2x. And if I divide negative 2x by both those terms, I'm left with an a minus b. And all of a sudden we think, maybe this is something. Maybe we've got this. Sometimes you think you have it, and then you're like, oh no, I don't. But I'm sorry, I'm just going to move that around a little bit. All right, so let's try the next one. We're going to do blue. All right, so the common thing with this, the first term is a positive, so I'm going to do a positive 3. And you'll see that there's an x in both of those as well. And if you divide 3x from both terms, you're left with an a minus b. And last but not least, those last two ones, there's no x's there, but they do have 3s. And because the first term is a negative, I'm going to use a negative 3 as well. And we get an a minus b. Just squeak that in. Okay, so now conveniently, you'll see that there's something very common in all of our terms. Okay, there wasn't an a and a b in every single term in that first expression and the original expression, but there is an a minus b in every 2. And so that means that we can factor out that a minus b. from every single term. And what's left is a 2x squared minus 2x plus a 3x minus 3. Okay. Now, you could group those like terms, but then you're going to want to use decomp method or box method to factor, and you're going to have to split that group term up anyway. So you may as well just leave it split and either use box method for these 4 terms and put those 4 terms in the box, or you use decomp method because you're already halfway there. You've already decomposed the middle term because you haven't put it together. So you're going to group like terms again. So I'm going to group these like terms here. And that a minus b is just going to kind of hang out to the side. We're not going to forget that it's there, but we're just going to work with what's in that highlighted second bracket for right now. So we have a 2x that's common with both those terms. Oops, I meant to do this in red. And if you divide that from both terms, you're left with an x minus 1. And if you look at that second bracket, this is a positive, so you're going to put a positive here. There's a 3 that is the greatest common factor with both those terms, and you're left with an x minus 1. Okay, this is all technically being multiplied with that a minus b. We haven't forgotten that a minus b, we're just ignoring it for a little bit. Okay, so now you can, again, just focus on what's in those blue brackets, and you'll notice that both those terms have an x minus 1. So you're going to factor out x minus 1, okay, and that leaves you with a 2x plus 3. Right, so that's what's in the blue bracket, and we can't forget that there's also an a minus b. So if we put that a minus b here, boom, there it is. And now we have factored everything. Of course, we double check to see if any of those brackets can be simplified further, which they can't be, and we are done. And that was how we factor something by grouping, and why I really like, if you can, for you to start practicing factoring by decomp if you can, because it really helps you out in questions like the one we just did. Alrighty, so if you can try those questions in the last section, that would be great. There was also, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was like an extension sheet on the last trig worksheet with things that looked like, I can't remember the exact question, so I have it in front of me, but it was like cos squared theta plus 2 cos theta plus 1 or something like that. You can solve that by substitution. So you would let u equal cos theta, and then you would solve it from there. All right, so if you are getting this and it's making sense, maybe go back to that worksheet if you still have it and give that a go. And if you don't have it, this one should work. Give that one a go. All right, I hope that helped. If you have any questions, please let me know. I hope you guys are having a good day.